Welcome and thank you for joining this webinar from Orbit to Everywhere, Comprehensive Assessment of Modern Space Communication, prepared by Alpert Research Team. Wireless satellite communication is undergoing a paradigm shift from a specialized high-latency backup solution to a primary, low-latency component of the global internet backbone. Driven by the new space economy, reusable launch vehicles, and 3GPP NTN standardization, this technology is now converging with terrestrial networks to deliver ubiquitous coverage. This Alpert Research Team webinar provides a comprehensive technical, operational, and strategic examination of the technologies enabling this unprecedented expansion in global wireless communication. Moving from specialized backup to primary global backbone, that changes everything. It changes the game for business, government, and, consumer connectivity. So we're going to spend the next hour moving from really the orbital physics all the way down to the specific AI algorithms that make this whole system work. We're going to focus on the why and the how behind this disruptive growth.
We have to start with this concept of the new space paradigm because it's less about new physics and more about the industrialization of space. That's what made all of this economically viable in the first place. It's a complete departure. We're moving from these bespoke, specialized applications, things only the military or a massive telco would use, to something that is becoming a commoditized, ubiquitous part of the internet backbone. What confluence of factors, what the Alpert Research Team calls the new space drivers, has kicked off this huge shift.
The primary drivers are all rooted in these massive advancements in low Earth orbit, constellation design, and the miniaturization of electronics. The arrival of reusable rocket launch vehicles fundamentally changed the math. These systems have cut the per satellite launch cost by a staggering 60 to 80%. That cost reduction makes deploying these mega constellations, we're talking thousands of satellites, not just technically possible, but actually economically viable. And that cost reduction makes the next driver possible, which is miniaturization.
The old geostationary, or GEO, satellites were these massive platforms.
Huge. And they were, basically hand-built?
Now we're looking at LEO satellites that are, say, 150 to 600 kilograms.
Much smaller.
And that reduction in mass is critical because it allows for assembly line production. You're moving from that bespoke model to scalable batch production. So cheaper to build, cheaper to launch. At the end of the day, what does that mean for me, the user who just wants to connect?
It leads to a democratization of access, a much lower cost per transmitted bit. And the implication for the market is profound. We're seeing whole new business models emerge, especially in the IoT and machine-to-machine space. And the third driver is the one that really brings it home to our everyday devices, standardization.
Yes. This is what forces the convergence. Historically, satellite protocols were all proprietary, closed systems. But now you have the third generation partnership project, or 3GPP, the same body that sets the global standards for our mobile phones stepping in. They're defining non-terrestrial networks, or NTN.
Which basically forces satellites to speak the same language as 5G and soon 6G.
This integration means satellite is no longer just a backup.
It's a competitive, high-performance alternative.
And it can deliver speeds and latencies that go head-to-head with terrestrial fiber in places where laying that fiber just doesn't make financial sense. It really democratizes access.
Which brings us to the really critical social and economic relevance of all this, bridging the global connectivity gap. This isn't just about getting faster speeds for people who already have internet. It's about reach.
Terrestrial networks, largely fiber and cellular, they only cover about 15% of the globe's surface area. Satellite connectivity is the necessary technology to expand internet access to that other 85%. We're talking about remote, rural, maritime, and aviation sectors. This capability is paramount for global socioeconomic development.
Can you give us a concrete example of that socioeconomic leverage?
Consider remote regions in the Pacific Islands or, say, the interiors of Africa and South America. Laying fiber or building microwave towers across that kind of vast, challenging terrain is often economically infeasible. Sometimes it's physically impossible. Satellite technology offers a distance-independent cost structure. So by enabling things like telemedicine, e-banking, and virtual classrooms in these areas, SCTech provides a fundamental building block for economic modernization. This is what's often referred to as the universal service need. So before we dive into the specific technologies, let's just quickly establish the fundamental architecture. What exactly defines wireless satellite communication? What are its core parts?
It uses artificial satellites to bridge huge geographical distances. It's all about transmitting and receiving radio frequency, or RF, signals between different points on Earth.
And the key difference from cellular is that it bypasses all the ground stuff.
It's inherently infrastructure independent. You don't need local fiber, you don't need cables or cell towers. It offers connectivity wherever you have a clear line line of sight to the sky.
So if we're breaking this system down, you usually hear it talked about in 3 parts, or segments.
So you start with the space segment. This is the network of satellites themselves, and they can be in a huge range of altitudes. I mean, from as low as 160 kilometers all the way up to the high geostationary Earth orbit at 36,000 kilometers.
And that location, that altitude, really dictates everything about its performance. So you have the satellites in space. What about on the ground, connecting up to that network?
That would be the ground segment. This includes your large, sophisticated Earth stations, sometimes called teleports, which have these massive parabolic dishes for data exchange and network control.
And it also includes the terminals that people actually use.
Historically, we call them VSATs, very small aperture terminals, but they've been getting smaller and smaller. Let's move to the radio physics. We've established that SATCOM is essentially a relay system in the sky. We need to dissect that signal chain: uplink, transponder, and downlink.
The signal journey is straightforward in concept, but technologically very complex. The uplink is the first step. The ground station transmits encoded RF signals up to the satellite. Now, this signal has to overcome significant path loss just due to the immense distance. To maximize data rates and ensure a clean signal, ground stations often transmit using higher frequencies and very high power amplifiers. While higher frequencies allow for a wider bandwidth, and that translates directly into higher potential data rates. More data, faster. Furthermore, while atmospheric interference is always a factor, the ground station is a fixed, powerful installation. It can compensate for that interference much more easily than a small user terminal can.
So the signal gets up to the satellite. Once it hits, what happens inside?
It enters the transponder. This is an essential onboard component. It receives that uplink signal, it amplifies it significantly, sometimes by a factor of hundreds of thousands, and then it retransmits it back towards Earth on a different frequency. This frequency shift is absolutely critical. It's known as frequency translation, and it's necessary to avoid self-interference. It prevents the very powerful downlink signal from completely overwhelming the very weak incoming uplink signal. And that final leg is the downlink. That's what defines the satellite's coverage area on the ground.
The downlink sends the signal back to the receiving stations or terminals within the satellite's defined footprint. And the beauty of this is that the signal, after being amplified in space, can cover a massive geographical area all at once.
Which is why SATCOM is still just unbeatable for things like broadcasting.
Unparalleled for broadcast and for reaching very remote locations. Let's address that spectrum. Can you walk us through the major SETOM bands and their trade-offs?
Of course. The selection of a frequency band is always a careful trade-off. It's between the sheer capacity it offers, which increases with frequency, and its resilience to adverse weather conditions, particularly rain fade, which decreases with frequency.
So let's run through the main bands, starting at the low end.
We start with the L band, that's 1 to 2 gigahertz. It's valued for its resilience. The signal penetration is excellent. It's perfect for low power, low bandwidth, but critical applications. Think Iridium's mobile satellite phones, emergency services, GNSS signals, and a lot of emerging IoT stuff. The trade-off is just, limited total capacity.
Moving up a bit, we get to S-band.
Right, 2 to 4 gigahertz. S-band is a really nice balance. It's stable, resilient, and it's particularly favorable for compatibility with 5G NTN devices.
So we see it used for
mission-critical stuff, telemetry, tracking, and control for the satellites themselves. The Alpert Research Team notes that companies like Viasat and EchoStar have specific allocations in Europe for mobile satellite services in the S-band. It's very reliable. Next up is the C-band, 4 to 8 gigahertz. This is the traditional fixed satellite service band. It's prized universally for its extremely low susceptibility to rain fade. Because the signal is less attenuated by rain, it offers incredibly robust, high-reliability links. This makes it ideal for continuous TV distribution and critical VS enterprise networks.
Finally, we get to the bands that are really powering these modern high-throughput constellations.
This is where the big capacity gains are made. Ku-band, 12 to 18 gigahertz, and particularly Ka-band, 26 to 40 gigahertz, offer significantly wider bandwidths and thus much higher capacity. However, they are highly susceptible to atmospheric attenuation. Ka-band's vulnerability, what we call rain fade, is a critical design constraint. That means the received signal power is just severely diminished. But despite this challenge, Ka-band is increasingly prioritized for these high-capacity new radio NTN deployments, because the potential for bandwidth just outweighs the cost of mitigating the fade.
Once you've picked your frequency band, you have to actually prepare the signal for that journey. That's where modulation, encoding, or modcod comes in.
And this is where you're fighting to squeeze every last bit of efficiency out of the spectrum. It's a constant optimization problem.
It starts with modulation, right? How you pack the bits into the signal.
Exactly. Modulation schemes like PSK phase shift keying and QAM quadrature amplitude modulation, they just define how many bits you can carry in each transmitted symbol. So you'll hear terms like QPSK, 8PSK, 16QAM, QAM.
And the choice of which one to use is constrained by the link quality.
The critical constraint is the signal-to-noise ratio, or SNR. If you have a clean, strong signal, you can use a high-order modulation like 16 QAM and push a lot of data. If the channel gets noisy, you have to drop down to a more robust but slower scheme like QPSK, just to make sure the signal gets through. The receiver is constantly checking the channel quality and adapting. Channel coding, or forward error correction, FEC, it adds carefully designed redundancy to the data stream before you transmit it. This redundancy allows the receiver to detect and correct errors caused by noise or interference without having to ask for a retransmission, which would be horribly inefficient given the long propagation delay. The shift to modern standards like DVB-S2 exemplifies this perfectly. DVB-S2 uses low-density parity check coding, or LDPC. It's a far more powerful error correction scheme than the older convolutional or Reed-Solomon codes. LDPC coding allows the satellite link to operate much closer to the theoretical Shannon limit, that's the maximum possible data rate for a given noise level. It provides roughly a 30% capacity gain over the older DVB-S standard.
And that optimization is still ongoing.
The carrier cancellation technique, or CCT. It addresses a major spectral inefficiency, the need for frequency separation between your uplink and downlink signals. CCT allows for true full duplex operation, transmitting and receiving simultaneously on the exact same frequency. It achieves this by generating an anti-phase signal of the transmitter's own signal and injecting it into the receiver path to precisely cancel out that self-interference.
So you're essentially electronically eliminating the echo of your own voice, which lets you double the usable spectrum.
In essence, yes. It really demonstrates how sophisticated signal processing can dramatically increase capacity within a limited allocated spectrum, and that leads to immediate economic benefits by reducing the cost per megabit.
Let's pivot to the hardware that facilitates all this, the antennas.
Traditional GEO systems relied on the parabolic reflector, the classic fixed dish. They offer high gain and they're reliable, but they're mechanically cumbersome and they require very precise physical aiming.
Which brings us to the revolution in user terminals.
The game changer here is the phased array antenna, or electronically steered array, ESA. These are flat panel arrays that contain thousands of small radiating elements. By precisely controlling the phase and amplitude of the signal fed to each of those elements, all through sophisticated software, the system can instantly and electronically steer the signal beam across an entire hemisphere with no moving parts. An ESA can seamlessly track a rapidly moving LEO satellite across the sky and then instantly switch its beam to the next rising satellite during a handover. It ensures uninterrupted connectivity.
The choice of orbit determines everything about the network. The physics of distance dictates the economics, the latency, and the entire network architecture. Let's break down the three primary orbits, starting way out at 35,786 kilometers with GEO.
Geostationary Earth Orbit, or GEO, is the veteran. It's located at 35,786 kilometers above the equator, and its key characteristic is that its orbital period precisely matches the Earth's rotation. That means the satellite appears stationary from a fixed point on the ground.
And that stationary quality offers massive operational simplicity.
A single GEO satellite can provide coverage to roughly 1/3 of the Earth's surface. Ground antennas are simple fixed dishes that don't need complex tracking. The drawback, however, is the significant distance. It imposes a fundamental speed of light penalty. The sheer distance results in very high latency, a round-trip delay typically ranging from 500 to 700 milliseconds.
That makes GEO inherently unsuitable for real-time interactive applications. Why does a delay of half a second matter so much?
For any application relying on continuous back-and-forth communication voice calls, VPN access, competitive gaming, or high-speed financial trading, that delay is just unacceptable. And while GEO capacity has grown enormously modern, high-throughput satellites can now exceed 500 GBPs using advanced multi-beam architectures, it really remains best suited for fixed data distribution and broadcasting, where latency is less critical than reliability and wide reach.
Moving inward from GEO, we find MEO.
Medium Earth Orbit, or MEO, spans a wide altitude range, generally from 7,000 to 25,000 kilometers. MEO constellations, like those used by O3b, offer a balance. They provide better coverage per satellite than LEO, and they offer significantly lower latency than GEO, around 100 to 150 milliseconds, but they still require tracking antennas. MEO is the orbit of choice for all major global navigation satellite systems, or GNSS. We're talking GPS, GLONASS, Galileo. The altitude provides a good balance between between orbital stability, coverage area, and the ability for those very weak signals to reach Earth effectively.
And finally, LEO, the low-altitude champion.
Low Earth orbit, or LEO, is defined by its proximity to Earth, ranging from 500 to 2,000 kilometers. This proximity is the single most important factor. Since the propagation distance is minimal, LEO achieves very low latency, typically between 20 and 50 milliseconds. That makes it genuinely competitive with high-speed terrestrial fiber networks for real-time applications.
But the physics of a low orbit means you have incredible velocity.
Yes. LEO satellites complete an orbit in a mere 90 to 120 minutes. This speed means an individual satellite is only visible to a user for a very short window, usually 5 to 15 minutes. This geometry demands large mega constellations, thousands of satellites organized across multiple orbital planes to ensure continuous, always-on global coverage, even in polar regions.
So if the satellites are moving that quickly, how does the network ensure a continuous session for a user? That sounds like a complex handover management problem.
It is, and handover is solved through sophisticated network topology and the user equipment itself. The network has to constantly calculate the ephemeris, the precise position of every single satellite, determining which one is about to set and which is about to rise. And the user terminal, like that ESA we discussed, must execute a seamless, instantaneous switch of its beam, often multiple times an hour, to maintain data session continuity.
That rapid routing requirement leads directly to the need for a mesh in space.
This is perhaps the most significant technological leap in modern SATCOM, the implementation of high-speed intersatellite links, or ISLs. These advanced LEO systems use laser technology optical ISLs to create a dynamic mesh network right there in space. Laser communication offers several critical advantages. First, enormous throughput. We're talking 100 to 200 Gbps per link, which far exceeds RF limits. Second, extremely low interference because the laser beam is highly directional and very narrow. And third, latency. Light actually travels faster in the vacuum of space than it does in fiber optic cables on Earth. This reduces propagation delay significantly over long hauls of thousands of kilometers.
The strategic implication there is profound. By routing traffic satellite to satellite across oceans, they achieve a new level of resiliency and independence from the terrestrial network.
The space mesh bypasses reliance on vulnerable or geographically inconvenient ground gateways. It provides resilience, it improves security, and it allows the network to route data along the shortest possible path. This is often significantly faster than fiber across continents, offering what the Alpert Research Team highlights as a key competitive advantage in global data transport.
Let's delve into the brains of the satellite itself, the payload architecture. This choice really defines whether the satellite is just a passive mirror or an active, intelligent node in a network. We're talking about transparent versus regenerative payloads.
Right. The distinction is centered on where the data processing happens. The transparent payload, often called bent pipe, is the simpler heritage architecture. It receives the uplink signal, amplifies it, translates its frequency, and transmits it down. It's acting purely as a repeater in the sky. All the complex signal processing, error correction, routing, switching, that all happens on the ground.
Simple and reliable, but it means the satellite itself is relatively unintelligent.
Correct. The intelligence is centralized in the ground segment. Conversely, the regenerative payload, or onboard processing, OBP, is a fully active node. It receives the uplink signal, it demodulates it all the way down to baseband digital data, it decodes it, it performs routing and switching decisions based on the destination address, and then it re-encodes and remodulates it for the downlink. OBP is what enables the mesh architecture to decide where to send a data packet, which intersatellite link to use, or which spot beam to route it to. The satellite has to be able to read the digital header of that packet. This processing capacity is also a prerequisite for 3GPP Release 18 support for store and forward operation. That's where the satellite can temporarily hold data packets if the destination ground station or user terminal isn't immediately visible, and then it releases it once the path is clear.
And the ground segment is evolving just as fast, especially the user terminal, which is often the biggest cost for the customer.
We're seeing a huge shift from mechanical to electronic steering for antennas. The traditional parabolic reflector, the dish, is high gain and simple, but it's heavy, bulky, and needs motors to point it.
Fine for a fixed location, useless if you're moving.
Exactly. The revolution is the phased array antenna, or ESA, electronically steered antenna.
The flat panels.
Right. These flat panels use software to control thousands of tiny elements that steer the beam electronically instantly with no moving parts.
And for LEO, that's not just a nice to have, it's mandatory.
It's absolutely mandatory. You have to track satellites moving at thousands of kilometers per hour across the sky. ESAs are the essential enabler for SECOM on the move on planes, trains, and ships.
Let's look at the core subsystems that keep these things running.
The bus subsystems are just feats of engineering. You obviously need power generation, which is solar arrays, and storage, which is batteries.
You need to stay pointed in the right direction.
That's the attitude and orbit control system. You have reaction wheels and gyroscopes to maintain orientation, and modern LEO sats use highly efficient ion thrusters for station keeping and making those little orbital adjustments.
And space is a place of extreme temperatures.
Extreme. So thermal control is critical. You have radiators, heaters, insulation. You have to manage swings from over 120 degrees Celsius in the sun down to minus 150 in shadow.
And the brain of the operation.
The command and data handling, or C&DH, subsystem. That's the onboard computer that runs everything, receives commands, and sends back telemetry on the satellite's health.
Moving to the operation side, how do operators maximize the capacity of a satellite's limited spectrum? This must require a lot of sophistication in antenna design and network management.
It starts with the antenna design, multi-beam antennas and spot beams. Instead of a single wide beam covering an entire continent, modern high-throughput satellites generate many narrow, high-power spot beams. This allows for extensive spatial frequency reuse.
Meaning the system can use the exact same Ka-band frequency in two geographically separated spot beams simultaneously without them interfering with each other.
And this spatial reuse vastly multiplies the overall spectral efficiency. Dynamic beamforming allows the operator to shape and steer the beams, directing maximum power and capacity to areas where demand is highest. Consider a sophisticated system. This system performs a comprehensive network-wide link budget analysis. This near real-time assessment allows the network to dynamically switch the carrier type, moving traffic away from a static time division multiple access, or TDMA, to a more flexible burst mode, wave switch, or single channel per carrier operation. It's optimizing modulation and coding for the instantaneous link condition. This dynamic approach ensures maximum bandwidth use and has been shown to achieve throughput gains of up to 15% compared to using static, pre-allocated methods.
Finally, let's talk about the big operational reality of LEO, orbital safe, collision avoidance. When you put thousands of things up there, the risk of a Kessler syndrome cascade is real.
It's a daunting mathematical problem. When two objects get close, a conjunction event, you have to calculate the probability of collision, or POC.
Which is not simple.
No, it's a complex calculation that requires constant, precise monitoring of every object.
And if the risk is too high, you have to move.
You perform a collision avoidance maneuver. This is typically a bi-impulsive maneuver to separate thruster burns to change your trajectory.
And the timing on that is critical for fuel, right?
The FCC now requires new LEO satellites to be able to actively maneuver and, crucially, to deorbit within 5 years of their mission ending.
Down from 25 years.
A huge change. It's a massive improvement for orbital hygiene and long-term sustainability.
This brings us to the point where space really meets your smartphone. The whole vision of non-terrestrial networks, or NTN, being formalized by the 3GPP.
And the 3GPP looked at the world and saw this massive inefficiency. We have 5G as the global standard, but something like 85% of the Earth's surface oceans, deserts, mountains has no cellular coverage. So NTN's goal is to seamlessly integrate satellites into that 5G and 6G ecosystem to connect potentially billions of new devices.
And this includes the really high-stakes concept of direct-to-cell, or D2C.
Allowing a completely unmodified phone in your pocket to connect directly to a satellite that's acting like a cell tower in space. It's what companies like Starlink and AST Space Mobile are racing to achieve.
So which 3GPP releases actually made this official?
The groundwork was laid in Release 17. That established the whole architectural framework for 5G NTN. It focused initially on the simpler transparent, or bent pipe architecture.
And it also brought in the Internet of Things.
Release 17 defined IoT NTN, which lets low-power IoT devices use satellite links, especially in those resilient L-band and S-band frequencies.
And now with Release 18, what we call 5G Advanced, it gets more complex.
Release 18 refines and expands on everything. It optimizes NTN IoT, it expands frequency support up into FR2, specifically prioritizing the high-capacity Ka-band, and it really focuses on improving mobility and handover.
And it brings in those smarter satellites.
Importantly, Release 18 formally introduced support for store and forward operations, which is a key step towards standardizing the use of those intelligent regenerative payloads we talked about.
The ultimate consumer goal here is direct-to-device, D2D, allowing standard, unmodified cellular devices to connect directly to the satellite. This eliminates the need for bulky, proprietary terminals.
D2D is the market driver for ubiquitous connectivity. It leverages technology like standard 5G new radio protocols, but adapted for the space link. We're seeing several players, including established satellite operators and the LEO mega constellations, racing to enable unmodified smartphones and IoT modules to communicate directly with satellites. It's effectively erasing the technical boundary between terrestrial and space networks.
Let's synthesize these technical concepts now into the core mission, delivering global connectivity. We established that SATCOM's primary benefit is its unmatched geographic reach.
The defining advantage is its distance-independent cost structure. For a terrestrial network, every kilometer of fiber or every microwave link adds CapEx and OpEx. For a satellite in orbit, the marginal cost to deliver a bit of data to a user in a remote village is virtually the same as to a user in a city center.
And LEO specifically has completely changed the performance expectations for satellite broadband.
We are no longer talking about low data rate VSAT links from 20 years ago. Modern LEO systems are designed to deliver competitive high-speed internet access, targeting residential and enterprise speeds typically between 50 and 200 millips per user. This performance profile makes them a viable competitor not just for rural areas, but also as a backup service in urban environments where fiber redundancy is required.
Beyond residential and community access, where does this extended reach create the most strategic value?
In the three pillars of global mobility and infrastructure. First, rural development and infrastructure. This includes critical services, telemedicine facilitating remote diagnostics, e-banking maintaining financial services, and virtual classrooms providing educational equity across remote continents. Second, mobility. This relies on continuous links for maritime shipping, commercial aviation for in-flight connectivity, and increasingly long-haul autonomous logistics systems.
And the third pillar?
Remote industrial and resource management. Think of deep-sea oil platforms, remote mining operations, or long-distance pipelines. These assets are often miles from any terrestrial infrastructure, yet they require real-time telemetry, monitoring, and robust communication for the crew. Satellite is the only feasible primary solution for them.
While LEO and data get all the attention, satellite broadcasting is still a massive foundational part of this industry.
The broadcast model is classic point-to-multipoint. A single transmission from one satellite can reach millions of homes simultaneously. The architecture is robust. A big uplink center sends the content to a GEO satellite, which then broadcasts it down to all the little dishes on people's homes.
And this efficiency is heavily dependent on the DVB standards.
The standards are what ensure interoperability and efficiency. DVB-S2 is the established workhorse. Its introduction of high-order modulation and that sophisticated LDPC coding provided a significant capacity jump, about 30% over the older DVB-S. That extra efficiency is what made the economical delivery of high-definition and early 4K content possible via satellite. DVB-S2X is an optimized extension. It offers increased spectral efficiency through finer granularity and modulation and coding rate selection. Crucially, it introduced very low signal-to-noise ratio modes. These modes are specifically designed for demanding environments, like mobile reception, where small antennas get a weaker signal, or for professional links in adverse weather.
I'll also add something called beam hopping. What mechanism does beam hopping use in the context of broadcasting?
Beam hopping is a key feature in DVB-S2X. It allows the satellite operator to dynamically shift the satellite's transmitted power and bandwidth among multiple spot beams on a millisecond scale. So instead of having a fixed allocation for a whole region, beam hopping allows the satellite to momentarily hop capacity to specific geographic beams where demand is spiking, say, for a major sporting event. It maximizes resource use across the entire coverage area.
Which frequency bands carry the bulk of this broadcasting traffic?
C-band is heavily used for reliable distribution links, especially for network operators who need high resilience against rain fade for their professional feeds. However, Ku and Ka bands are used for the massive capacity requirements of direct-to-home or DTH services. Their high throughput supports hundreds of standard and HD channels delivered to millions of consumers. The general evolution is toward 4K and 8K ultra-high definition and the integration of interactive services, creating these new hybrid terrestrial satellite delivery models.
Beyond data, the other critical function of SATCOM is precision timing and location. Let's focus on Global Navigation Satellite Systems, or GNSS.
GNSS is a collection of MEO satellite constellations: GPS, GLONASS, Galileo, they do. These systems operate by continuously broadcasting highly precise time signals that are derived from atomic clocks on board the satellite. The receiver on the ground measures the elapsed time, the signal's time of flight from multiple satellites simultaneously. This process, called trilateration, allows the receiver to determine its distance from each satellite and thus pinpoint its exact position on Earth.
We often hear about needing 3 satellites for 2D positioning. What's the fundamental requirement for accurate 3-dimensional positioning?
Accurate 3D positioning, so that's latitude, longitude, and altitude, requires a minimum of 4 satellite signals. 3 signals are used to establish the latitude and longitude, fixing the position in 2D space. The crucial 4th signal is used to solve for an unavoidable system variable, the receiver's own internal clock bias. Since the typical quartz clock in your phone is far less precise than the space-based atomic clocks, that 4th signal allows the receiver to align its time base with the system time, and in doing so, it simultaneously calculates altitude.
Comparing the major constellations, Europe's Galileo system has often been cited for its technical advantages.
While the US-based GPS system, with around 31 satellites, is the global standard, Europe's Galileo system is strategically significant for providing an independent, civilian-controlled service. It's separate from military systems. Technically, Galileo offers superior raw accuracy, often achieving 1-meter real-time accuracy, and it integrates dedicated search and rescue transponders, making it a critical part of the global MEOSAR system for distress localization.
So how are modern receivers improving positioning accuracy despite signal blockages?
2 techniques are really key. First, multi-constellation receivers. By combining signals from GPS, GLONASS, Galileo, and Beidou, the receiver has visibility to a much larger number of satellites with better geometric distribution. This significantly improves accuracy and reliability, especially in environments where buildings block the signal. Second, multi-frequency receivers, which use both legacy bands like L1 and newer frequencies like L5.
And why is using multiple frequencies so important for precision?
Because the ionosphere, a layer of the atmosphere, it delays radio signals differently depending on their frequency. So by measuring the differential delay between 2 frequencies, say L1 and L5, the receiver can calculate and compensate for that ionospheric delay in real time. This sophisticated compensation is vital for high-precision applications like autonomous vehicles and precision agriculture.
Okay, when national security and disaster response are at stake, SATCOM transitions from a commercial utility to a critical protected asset. What are the paramount performance requirements for these demanding users?
Reliability, reach, and speed are absolutely everything. The requirements are uncompromising. Extremely high reliability, often greater than 99.9% uptime, global reach, including pole-to-pole coverage, and low latency, which is particularly crucial for command and control, or C2, applications where real-time decision-making is necessary.
In disaster response, the core value proposition is the rapid establishment of communication when ground infrastructure is completely destroyed.
That's resilience in action. When floods, earthquakes, or conflicts take out fiber lines and cellular towers, portable satellite terminals, VSATs, can establish high-bandwidth connectivity within hours. They're independent of the local terrestrial grid. This provides the critical lifeline necessary for rescue coordination, humanitarian aid logistics, and maintaining communication with isolated communities.
For military SATCOM, the focus shifts heavily toward protected communications in environments where an enemy is actively trying to deny or disrupt access.
The central design principle there is protected communications. It's all about ensuring resilience against electronic warfare tactics like jamming, and also minimizing the risk of interception. This concept is often referred to as low probability of intercept detect, or LPID. They employ several layers of technology. First, frequency hopping spread spectrum, FHSS, where the signal rapidly jumps across a wide range of frequencies, making it very hard for an adversary to jam or even track. Second, sophisticated multi-layer encrypted waveforms like AES or standard. Third, you have hardened satellites that can withstand harsh conditions, and they're equipped with highly directional anti-jam antennas. These specialized antennas can create nulls, areas of zero signal reception, precisely aimed at known jamming sources to effectively suppress the interference. Military SATCOM is moving toward real-time intelligence distribution. This is increasingly aided by onboard AI processing of high-resolution imagery and sensor data. So instead of downlinking huge amounts of raw data for analysis on the ground, the satellite can analyze the data right there in orbit and distribute mission-critical, summarized intelligence directly to tactical users. This high-speed, secure backbone provides mission resilience, ensuring critical operations can proceed regardless of what's happening with regional terrestrial networks.
But space physics creates huge problems for terrestrial protocols.
The first and most brutal one is Doppler effect compensation. In LEO, the satellite is moving so fast relative to you on the ground that it causes these huge frequency shifts, up to 50 kilohertz at a 2 gigahertz frequency.
Which would just completely confuse a normal phone?
It would never be able to lock on. So the solution makes the user device smarter. Your phone or your IoT sensor has to get ephemeris data about the satellite's orbit and pre-compensate for that frequency shift before it even tries to connect.
Which adds a lot of processing complexity.
A lot, especially for a tiny, low-power IoT device. The second challenge is handover management.
Because the satellite is gone in minutes.
You need constant handovers to maintain a session. 3GPP had to define new advanced handover procedures to make that seamless.
And the third one is latency.
Latency adaptation. That long signal delay, especially to GEO, just breaks a lot of the timing assumptions built into the 5G core network. A great example is HRQ, the hybrid automatic repeat request.
That's the quick feedback that says, I got the data packet.
And over a long satellite link, that quick feedback isn't quick at all. So 3GPP had to introduce mechanisms to, for example, conditionally disable HQ for LEO use cases to keep things running efficiently.
And all of this seems to depend on one thing, knowing exactly where you are.
For now, current NTN solutions require the user device to have a GNSS receiver for positioning and timing. You need that to calculate the Doppler shift and the handover timing. Future releases are trying to reduce that dependency, but for now, precise location is mandatory.
So with all this intelligence, it seems like artificial intelligence is becoming the fundamental operating system for these new constellations.
It's absolutely indispensable because the classic problems, resource management, network control, security, they're just so much more complex and volatile in space than in a stable terrestrial network. AI provides the autonomy you need to solve these problems in real time.
How does AI help with dynamic resource allocation?
Okay, so for problems like dynamically assigning channels or power or bandwidth in a multi-beam satellite, deep reinforcement learning, or DRL, is proving really effective. You train an AI agent to learn the best allocation strategy by having it interact with the simulation of the network environment. It learns through trial and error. This DRL approach gives you a great balance between optimal performance and a computational cost that's actually feasible to run on a satellite.
How does AI help overcome the delay when you're trying to adapt the modulation and coding?
This is one of the most critical applications. The traditional way, adaptive coding and modulation, or ACM, is reactive. The receiver measures the channel quality, sends that info back, and by the time the transmitter adapts, the channel has already changed.
Because of the delay.
Because of the delay. So ML algorithms flip that. They become predictive. Specifically, long short-term memory networks, or LSTM. They're a type of neural network that's really good at processing time series data. So an LSTM looks at the recent history of the signal quality, the SENR, and it learns to predict what the quality will be in the near future. The optimal mod HUD before the delay happens, which maximizes your throughput and your link stability.
What about managing the physical resources on the payload itself?
For that, we're seeing neural networks used for flexible payload reconfiguration. A great example is power balancing. You might have a user at the edge of a beam who has a weak signal, while someone in the center has more signal than they need.
So the AI can shift the power.
And NNN can dynamically reallocate power away from the center and push it to the edge, improving the overall quality of experience for everyone in the beam, all without any manual intervention. For security, autoencoder neural networks can be trained to detect interference by treating it as an anomaly. If the signal statistics suddenly look weird, it flags it. And for health, telemetry mining uses AI in the Mission Control Center to analyze all the data coming down from the satellite, spot subtle drifts, and predict component failures before they become critical.
Let's bring this down to earth and talk about the practical impact of LEO on global connectivity. That low latency changes everything.
It means LEO can finally support all those interactive real-time applications. We're talking video conferencing, financial trading platforms, online gaming, and the speeds, typically 25 to over 100 megabits per second, make it a direct competitor to fixed broadband services like cable and DSL.
And with intersatellite links, the reach is truly global.
You're reducing the dependence on having ground gateways everywhere. You can provide service over oceans and the poles. It's a massive shift.
And the socioeconomic impact of bridging the digital divide, that's probably the most important outcome here.
You can now deliver the same quality of experience to a rural village as you can to a city. And that enables so many critical services. Telemedicine, e-banking, virtual classroom, all powered by reliable, high-speed internet.
And it's not just for emergencies or underserved areas.
The Alpert Research Team pointed out that in a market like Thailand, where fiber is actually affordable, the service found a niche with people who live just outside the fiber footprint but have the money to pay a premium for guaranteed high speed. It proves the demand isn't just about poverty, it's about access to quality.
Let's shift to the broader market and the huge diversity of commercial applications that are being enabled by this new, reliable satellite tech. It seems to be touching every major industry.
Let's start with mobility and connectivity. The maritime and aviation sectors are enormous drivers. In-flight connectivity, or IFC, is a big one, but it's not just for passengers. Airlines are using it for essential operational data, like real-time engine telemetry. We're seeing companies really expand their footprint in IFC by leveraging those advanced ESA antennas antennas we've been talking about.
And what about for media?
News gathering is still a classic use case. You have these mobile truck-mounted antennas that let a news crew broadcast a live feed from literally anywhere in the world, bypassing any local infrastructure problems.
Okay, what about industrial and enterprise solutions, where things like business continuity and IoT are the main drivers?
In banking and finance, satellite provides critical backup connectivity, and it also promotes financial inclusion. You can have ATM networks and remote bank branches in underserved areas that use VSA or LEO links to securely connect to the central systems.
For energy and utilities, it's all about monitoring remote assets.
The energy sector uses satellite IoT to monitor smart grid, pipelines, and especially renewable energy sites like remote wind farms that are often way outside of cellular range.
The same applies to agriculture.
Agriculture optimization or precision farming. Satellite IoT connects remote sensors that monitor soil moisture, crop health, and can even help predict pest outbreaks. It's all about using data to be more efficient.
So the core idea of remote asset management is still a huge driver across all these industries.
It's fundamental. Whether it's an offshore oil platform, a remote mine, or an unmanned research station, you need that high reliability link for operations, for maintenance, and for safety. Satellite is what makes managing those high-value assets on a global scale possible.
The success of LEO constellation really comes down to the business model. It seems like the entire economic foundation has shifted.
It has shifted fundamentally. The LEO business model is all about leveraging that drastic reduction in upfront cost to deliver a lower total cost of ownership, or TCO, to the customer.
It all comes back to mass production and reusable rockets.
Right. They drive down the cost per bit of data, which allows for competitive pricing, and the revenue streams are usually diversified. You have the direct-to-consumer service, $100 a month or so, supplemented by high-premium enterprise and government contracts that demand very secure, very reliable service and are willing to pay for it.
And the economic model of these LEO constellations, fueled by reusable launches, it fundamentally changes the capital investment required.
The economics are drastically different from the past. The combined effect of low-cost reusable launches and miniaturized, mass-produced satellites significantly lowers the total cost of ownership for the network operator. This lower TCO enables space network operators to reduce the connectivity cost per bit, making satellite bandwidth more affordable for mass market consumption.
That brings us to a critical strategic decision, the need for a thorough total cost of ownership analysis.
This is a core conclusion from the Alpert Research Team's strategic assessment. A common procurement mistake is focusing solely on the lowest initial bandwidth subscription fee or the cheapest ground equipment. An initial cheap network design often means accepting limitations. For instance, ground hardware that can't support advanced efficiency techniques like CCT or advanced ACM. Well, if you invest in lower-tier ground equipment, you may be stuck running the network at a spectral efficiency of, say, 1.40 bps. If investing a bit more capex into high-efficiency hardware allows you to deploy CCT and reach 2.07 bps efficiency, the resulting bandwidth savings over the long term will often vastly exceed the initial equipment expenditure over a 5 or 7 year lifespan. Only a comprehensive TCO analysis, factoring in hardware, software, and long-term bandwidth consumption, can accurately determine the true economic viability of a strategy.
So the business models themselves are becoming highly segmented, ranging from just selling capacity to offering full managed services.
The market is maturing, and it requires diversified models. We see retail direct-to-consumer subscriptions like Starlink, large-scale wholesale capacity agreements selling gigabits to cellular operators for backhaul, DTD enablement services, and highly specialized government and enterprise managed services that bundle hardware, security, and guaranteed QoS metrics.
What are some of those advanced techniques that are driving down that OpEx?
Anything that lets you push more data through the same slice of spectrum is gold. Things like carrier cancellation technique, or CCT, and using lower roll-off factors can significantly boost your data rate. We've seen real-world examples where just implementing CCT improved efficiency from, say, 1.4 bits per hertz to over 2 bits per hertz. Another example is dynamic optimization systems like Stella. This is a system that is constantly, every few milliseconds, analyzing the entire network's link budgets and dynamically choosing the most efficient way to allocate bandwidth. And that kind of dynamic approach can squeeze out up to 15% more throughput compared to just using static, dedicated carriers.
Now let's tie everything together with concrete applications and use cases that really demonstrate the strategic impact of modern NSE-Com.
The primary foundational use case is the delivery of high-speed broadband and digital inclusion. This means delivering reliable internet access to homes, communities, and schools, supporting essential public services. The ability to launch virtual classrooms and telemedicine initiatives transforms educational access and public health outcomes in previously isolated regions.
And for the industrial and enterprise world, SATCOM is often the only solution for that last mile in harsh environments.
For industry, we see several critical areas. First, cellular backhaul, where satellite connects remote 4G and 5G base stations to the core network in areas where fiber deployment is just too expensive. Second, IoT and massive M2M connectivity is huge. This covers precision agriculture aggregating data from soil sensors and weather stations, and remote asset management for distributed infrastructure. SATCOM supports financial services by linking automated teller machine networks and remote branch offices, especially in emerging markets. This ensures continuous service and enables financial inclusion in regions where unreliable terrestrial connectivity would otherwise be a major limiting factor.
Mobility is a growing market that absolutely requires satellite independence.
Transportation and mobility rely on SATCOM for seamless, continuous connectivity, irrespective of geographic location. This includes critical functions for maritime vessels, providing crew communication and operational data, aviation, supplying high-speed in-flight connectivity to passengers, and supporting the data requirements of emerging long-distance autonomous systems that need persistent command and control links.
Finally, its non-negotiable role in disaster recovery.
As we've discussed, resilience is key. The use of rapidly deployable, portable VSAT terminals allows for immediate communication establishment following natural or man-made disasters. It supports rescue coordination, government continuity, and maintains communication with isolated populations until terrestrial services can be restored.
Let's shift our focus to the market dynamics. What economic and regulatory imperatives are driving this massive investment bubble in space infrastructure?
The core drivers are global mandates and business continuity needs. First, there's the political imperative for universal service needs and closing the digital divide. Second, the relentless mobility expansion across air, sea, and rail requires persistent global links. And third is the requirement for enterprise and government resilience. They're demanding redundant communication links that are independent of terrestrial vulnerabilities.
The hypergrowth and technical sophistication of SATCOM bring equally complex challenges. Let's address the scarcity of spectrum and the resulting congestion.
Spectrum congestion is chronic, particularly in the most desirable high-capacity bands. Ku and Ka bands are becoming saturated. This is forcing the industry to investigate and deploy systems using much higher frequencies, like the QV bands, 40 to 75 gigahertz.
The downside.
Moving higher just exacerbates propagation issues. It means severe rain fade and atmospheric absorption becomes. The Ku and Ka bands are getting very crowded, and all these new applications are straining the existing allocations. The core challenge is spectrum sharing.
Especially with 5G terrestrial networks.
Exactly. Terrestrial 5G operators want to use parts of the Ku and Ka bands, too. We've already seen this play out in the C-band, which has to be carefully coordinated now between satellite services and terrestrial fixed links to prevent interference.
And who manages all of this?
Globally, it's the International Telecommunication Union, the ITU. They manage frequency allocations through international treaty. Then, at the national level, you have regulators like the FCC in the US or the NCC in Nigeria that handle the actual licensing.
And the fact that satellites have to share spectrum with terrestrial systems is a source of constant regulatory and technical friction.
That coexistence is the interference challenge. For example, the use of C-band for fixed satellite service overlaps with various terrestrial fixed service links, and Ka-band faces co-channel interference challenges with 5G cellular systems. Preventing harmful interference requires extremely careful coordination, adherence to strict power flux density limits imposed by regulators, and the establishment of precise geographic coordination zones to ensure the systems can operate side by side without mutual disruption.
The rapid proliferation of LEO satellites has also forced a reckoning with orbital debris and sustainability.
The increase in mega constellations drastically raises the probability of collision events. Active collision avoidance maneuvers, calculated autonomously by network operators, are now a daily operational necessity. And regulatory bodies responding to this threat have tightened guidelines. They now require LEO satellites to be capable of deorbiting and safely burning up in the atmosphere within 5 years of the end of their mission.
On the signal level, we've repeatedly emphasized atmospheric attenuation and rain fade.
Since rain fade is an unavoidable physical phenomenon, we have to engineer around it. 3 techniques are critical. First, site diversity. This involves deploying 2 ground stations geographically separated by several kilometers. Since heavy rain is highly localized, the probability of both sites experiencing severe fade at the same time is very low. The system just switches traffic to the clearer link. Second, uplink power control, where the ground station automatically increases its transmitted power to compensate for measured atmospheric losses. And third, the sophisticated adaptive modulation encoding we discussed, which dynamically lowers the data rate to improve link resilience when fade state is detected.
Finally, the role of international governance.
The International Telecommunication Union, or ITU, is a UN specialized agency responsible for managing global spectrum allocation and orbital slot registration. They maintain the complex database of satellite frequencies and orbital positions worldwide. They're the body that ensures coordination and prevents international chaos in spectrum use.
And the policy philosophy that encourages competition and consumer choice is based on technology-neutral regulations.
Regulators are strongly urged to adopt rules that don't favor one technology, whether it's wireline, cellular, or satellite, over another. Licensing requirements should be strictly limited to managing two core issues: public safety and the allocation of genuinely scarce resources like frequency spectrum. This promotes fair competition and allows the most efficient technical solutions to serve the market, regardless of the platform. The future network will be defined by seamless integration and extreme intelligence. First, multi-orbit integration will be the norm. Future systems will dynamically route traffic across LEO for low latency applications, MEO for specialized broadband, and GEO for fixed capacity and broadcasting. The network will intelligently select the best orbit for the specific application.
What does the next generation, the 6G vision, look like, and what new technologies are on the horizon?
The 6G vision is really about a fully integrated three-dimensional network. It's not just terrestrial or just satellite. It's a seamless fabric that connects terrestrial 6G nodes, airborne platforms like drones, and all the satellite layers.
So you could have seamless satellite backhaul for your 6G cell tower.
Or even potentially data centers in the sky, where you distribute core network processing power across the constellation.
And the movement of compute power into orbit will continue, leading to space-based computing.
The 6G vision includes the satellite layer as a fully fledged three-dimensional component of the cloud. This means next-generation satellites will feature fully reconfigurable digital payloads acting as data centers in the sky. This capability supports edge service models, allowing processing and caching to occur closer to the user on the satellite itself, which significantly reduces latency for services like content delivery and local data analysis.
The idea that satellites are essential not just for classical data, but for entirely secure quantum communication.
This is truly a revolutionary development, and it's driven by fundamental physics. Quantum communication, specifically quantum key distribution, or QKD, offers theoretically unbreakable security. On Earth, the quantum no-cloning theorem means you can't amplify a quantum signal without destroying the data state. Therefore, you can't use classical optical repeaters to boost terrestrial fiber links, which fundamentally limits their distance to about 100 to 200 kilometers due to fiber loss.
So satellites provide the solution by drastically reducing the distance the signal has to travel through lossy mediums.
A single satellite, acting as a trusted relay, can replace an entire chain of classical ground repeaters, enabling something called entanglement swapping across thousands of kilometers. And that is the mechanism you need to build intercontinental quantum networks.
We have to reiterate the continuing push toward true ubiquity via direct-to-device.
The technical challenges of D2D will be resolved, driven by these 3GPP NTN advancements. This trend is leading the market toward a world where a standard smartphone is always connected, regardless of geography, finally blurring the distinction between terrestrial and space communication entirely.
And lastly, the continuing democratization and miniaturization of satellites.
The trend of decreasing size and cost, exemplified by the proliferation of CubeSats, will continue to drive down the barrier to entry. This allows for specialized niche satellite networks for things like scientific research or specialized global IoT monitoring to be deployed by a wider range of organizations, further increasing the total number of assets in orbit.
As we conclude this strategic assessment derived from the Alpert Research Team analysis, the core narrative is clear. Wireless SATCOM has completed its transition from a specialized niche to an integral component of the global information infrastructure. The confluence of reusable launch vehicles and miniaturized satellites has fundamentally inverted the economics, making LEO mega constellations the low-latency disruptor. And this disruption is cemented by the adoption of 3GPP NTN, embedding space technology directly into the 5G and 6G cellular framework. The transformation is just undeniable.
It really is. What's so fascinating is just how quickly all these pieces have come together to take satellite from being this niche, high-latency tool into a core, competitive part of the global wireless backbone. This overview from the Alpert Research Team should really give you that full integrated picture.
Modern satellite communication has evolved from a specialized broadcast tool into a core pillar of global connectivity. enabling broadband, IoT navigation, and resilient communication infrastructures. With the rise of LEO constellations, AI-optimized networks, and 3GPP standardized NTN systems, satellite communications are poised to serve billions of users and devices worldwide. This Alpert Research Team overview delivers an integrated view of the technologies, architecture, applications, challenges, and opportunities shaping the next decade of satellite-enabled connectivity. Interested in gaining a deeper understanding of the transformative power of wireless technology? Join the Alpert Research Team's webinars to explore cutting-edge wireless innovations, their applications, and their implications. Click the links below to learn more.